the computer. So eventually these me showing you random topics things are going to end, and we're going to focus more on your passion projects and the other stuff you have to do for this class. But like I mentioned, I'm kind of front loading all this stuff at the beginning. So we're filling in as many potential blanks as possible. And also so it will help you if you're going to take, for instance, a LinkedIn class and like, I don't know, SQL or Python, then that intro would help. I haven't done the SQL one yet. So again, you want GitHub Desktop if you don't already have it. GitHub Desktop. Can't, yep, that's okay. Remove, I got rid of it. This is GitHub Desktop and what it looks like. Not very exciting. And this is, of course, GitHub. So what is all this junk? And why does everyone talk about it? And why does everyone use it? Well, first of all, on this What is GitHub page, I saw a nice stat where 87% of developers use Git. A lot of people don't know what Git is, though, even those 87%. If you've ever hung out with your terminal, you may know, but Git is a command in terminal. And so Git is actually kind of like a language. I mean, your terminal is running essentially as a Unix prompt, but you could install Git and run it. So if I was giving this presentation 3 years ago, I would show you all how to use Git from the command line because that was the best way to do it then. And so what I mean is like in terminal, you're doing things like git init and like git commit, whatever, and all this kind of stuff. And I always put people to sleep because they're like, I'm not going to be doing that stuff on the command line. And like, I don't like it. I understand that too. It's a little intimidating. GitHub Desktop kind of circumvents all that. So it's just putting it essentially, it's kind of like an IDE for software. I'm just going to make things a lot easier. Let me start at the beginning. Git is a language. It was developed by this dude a while ago, and we use it for version control. So primarily, the reason 87% of developers use Git is because we use it for collaboration. If I'm working on some aspect of a project and you're working on the other, we can use GitHub to collaborate and make sure we don't write over each other's work. And it's really good at that. So every time you add something to a GitHub repo, you're essentially creating a snapshot. Think of it as when you back up your computer. I'm sure everyone backs up their computer. You're creating that snapshot. If you back it up again a day later, you're creating a second snapshot. And the difference between this and backing up a computer is those snapshots never go away. So if I go to GitHub, which is essentially a hub for Git repositories, and this is not it, and I download a repo or repository, I'm getting the whole thing. Not just the files in it, but all the original stuff that happened to it long ago. And it's kind of a process. So you can see this is something this is the book that Jenny and I are collaborating on. And you can see that she's been much more active in pushing content to our shared repo than I have, which is good. I'm going to close this line, but just this is fascinating. Have you all heard about this? Oops. This is the latest introduction of AI into our lives. GitHub Copilot is supposed to help you write code. It writes it with you. So it's not free, and it also is not using any languages that we're using. This is mostly based around like interactive front-end web design. So most of this stuff looks to me like React or ES16 code. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. But it's really funny to me that like they've developed this thing that apparently while you're writing, it'll just figure out what you're trying to do and fill it all in. But we don't know any of these languages, so there's not one for R or anything. But maybe one day there will be. Now, that always raises the specter of, wait, are we never going to have to program again? I've been hearing that my whole life. You will always need people to communicate with computers because computers are dumb, right? They can't find a file if you lowercase one of the letters. Well, humans can, right? They'd be like, oh, you're an idiot. You know, you made a typo or whatever. Computers can't do that. We're always going to need someone to talk to computers. Even if these AI systems get really, really smart, we still need to tell them what to do until they take over and become our overlords. So anyways, Git is this kind of imaginary version control system that's hiding in plain sight on lots of people's computers and doing all this back-end stuff with backing up version control. GitHub is where you put all that stuff so other people can see your content and take it in a good way, hopefully. Oops, I just turned off the video. So let me show you something really quickly. Here is my folder for the book that Jenny and I are working on. And this is a Git repository. What I'm going to do is hold down Shift Command and hit period. And you might see a few new files pop up, but they're kind of hidden. You go in here. And in here, this is where the actual project is. And I'm just zooming in a little bit so y'all can see this clearer. You see all these like grayed out files? Well, those are hidden files. Now, again, Shift Command period is a shortcut on the Mac to show or hide hidden files. In case you were unaware, there are a lot of hidden files that are being created all the time in the background. I mean, you might have seen this before, like even when you use Microsoft Word, it'll have like a temporary file it's saving with like a $sign in front of the file name. This is a fun thing to do because sometimes in programming, you have to get into these hidden files. So all these files right here are related to the Git repo. So when I made that point that when we download a repo, we're getting not just the files, but the entire history of the project going back to its first commit. That's what I mean. That stuff isn't in the files that you download. You just get the latest version, but it is in here. And actually, there's even a folder called Git, and it's got all your branches and all your commits basically already in here. All these files that are invisible or hidden, by the way, they start with periods. That's how you tell a file to be invisible. Usually we don't have to do that. But anyways, those are the hidden files that it would insert into your local copy of a Git repository. So here's what I want to do is go to GitHub, and I'm going to create a new repository. I'm going to add a README to it, and then I'm going to try to get GitHub Desktop to connect to that and become friends with it. And I want to point out that what we're about to do used to be the thing that just like killed me on GitHub and also killed all my GitHub lectures, which is where I create something. It's really hard to tell these apart, isn't it? Because they're both so dark. I guess it's using a dark theme. I didn't even mean to do that. I increased the contrast on my computer last night, and that seems like really intense. Anyways, the dark color is really intense. I can't even see the background. But what I'm going to do is create a repo, like I mentioned, on GitHub, and I'm going to try to tell GitHub Desktop to connect to that and download the changes. Then I'm going to reverse that process and add some files locally, create a commit, and then push that up to GitHub. So this is where I used to always run into problems from the command line. Like I would create a repo, and then I try to tell my computer, all right, connect to this repo, and it would just freak out. It'd be like, there's already a repo in GitHub. Well, I'm not trying to create one, I'm trying to clone one, right? And so I try it the other way around. I'll make something locally, and when I try to push it to GitHub, I run into these errors. I don't have these errors anymore using GitHub Desktop. It seemed to have, either I got better or the program's better, but I don't cause any of those mistakes anymore. So if you don't have a GitHub account, they're free. I highly recommend that you get one. There's a very good chance wherever you end up working that they're going to use GitHub. Whatever you create as your username is going to be part of your URL. So that's kind of important. I believe I'm bwalsh5 to just stick with the kind of Elon parlance. It gives you a little dummy icon. You can tweak that, of course. And when you go to somebody's, I don't know, profile, I guess, it's going to show how much you contribute. And that's what this is kind of like a graph of. So you can see I was a lot more active in February, March, and July. And if we click on repositories, this is where we'll see all this stuff. So I've got a whole bunch of projects on here. Let me create a new one, and then I'm going to try to connect GitHub Desktop to this. So I'm going to click the big green new button. If you are on GitHub and you don't see the big green new button, you just have to go to repositories. It's not on the profile page, it's on the repos page. And let's make a new repo. So when you name this thing, you'll notice it gives you this little slash. So it's literally saying, this is your URL / whatever we're going to call this. Let's call this Monday, because I'm just going to put some stuff in there and delete it in today's Monday. By the way, the check means I don't have a repo already called that. You can make pens. You can make repositories private. A lot of companies do this. It is not the most secure thing in the world. So I was just looking up GitHub hack. And apparently, oh, I'm not seeing it. Apparently, a lot of repos got hacked. A lot of Microsoft's repos got hacked. I thought that was kind of interesting. So in other words, you could make this private, and I'm sure every repo that like Microsoft makes is private and has a password and is encrypted and stuff, but someone managed to get in there. Everything I make is public, so I'm just going to keep going. .gitignore file is, first of all, an invisible file because it starts with a period. And second of all, it's something you can use to say, ignore these files. These files are in my local folder. I don't want to push them up to GitHub. That's what that's for. I'll come back to the README in a second. Choose a license means, well, you're going to put this on GitHub. Anyone can see it, right? It's public, and they can take your code and make $1 million off of it. So if you're writing $1 million code, you probably don't want to post it to GitHub. What license would we want to choose for a kind of like real project that we're doing? Like if we're actually publishing something in R or JavaScript or something, which of these will we want to use? Well, first of all, any of them would work. Second of all, I tend towards some certain ones that I point out. First of all, MIT license sounds really vague, but that's the standard license that people have used for a really long time, and it works fine. I'm a big fan of Creative Commons. I am not familiar with the 0 version 1.0 universal, but the idea of Creative Commons is your content can be shared, and where applicable, you would get credit, but you are not like copywriting anything, right? I'm also not familiar with the unlicensed, but I'm guessing it also has to do with sharing things publicly. Now, this isn't necessary. You might be like, I'm just uploading like my homework. Like, why do I have to choose a license, you know? But again, this is if it becomes an issue because you put something super awesome. All right, I'm going to click add a README file and hit create repo. So it's going to redirect me to my new place. So it's going to be my username / Monday for this. And it's totally blank, right? There's no files in here. Well, it does say license. So there's a license that's default, and there's that MIT license. And then there's the README. If you click on the README, this is it. It's Monday. It's that same thing that we were just looking at a second ago. So in other words, when you create a README, it just shows up down here. You'll notice the extension of the README file. It's .md. This is a markdown file. And what that means is we can write in Markdown. So y'all have probably met R Markdown, which is what we used in our pubs. Markdown uses the exact same syntax. So this would be a second level heading. Let's create a link. Let's say link, oh boy, link to, I put the square, let me make my text way bigger. That's way better. Link to Amazon, square brackets, and then right after in parentheses, https://amazon.com. So that should be a link. I'm going to hit preview. Oh, I gotta commit these. Okay. Second level heading. So this is a first level heading or an H1 tag. This is a second level heading or an H2 tag. And here's my link to Amazon. So this is just Markdown in the sense that we can go in here and write basically shorthand HTML using Markdown. So if we Google Markdown like syntax or something like that, this is heavily covered on the web. So there's those headings, paragraphs. Let's see, let's get to lists. All right, so we create a list like that. I mean, it's just HTML, right? We could add images if we wanted. Ooh, that looks weird. Is there code for this? Okay, so you'll see the code. The code's kind of similar. You write text in a square bracket, and then in parentheses, you put the URL of where it goes. I think the only difference here with images compared to links is you'd want to include this exclamation point right at the front, which I believe adds it. Let's see if we can add that. Let me, I'm going to look for a picture of a trash can. Looks good. All right, I'm going to grab this image's address. It's obviously very important. And let's try that syntax. So I'm gonna, let me come back out and edit this guy. And let's see. I think we do square brackets and say trash can and parentheses and a link to it. And I think the only thing I'm forgetting here is the exclamation point up front. And let's see if that works. So again, I have to save this. Yeah, and there's our trash can. All right, there's Monday. It's a nice trash can, actually. It's clean. Okay. So we've created all this stuff up here. What does it look like? Well, if someone goes to bwalsh 5 Monday, they'll see the license, the README. Here's the README. There are no other files here or anything. I can't add files unless I upload them, right? But I could do that. Okay, so this all exists online, and there's no copy of it over here. Let's see, the current branch main as a blah, 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 blah. So how do I tell GitHub Desktop that I've created a new repo on github.com? The way we would do that is right here. And I think this is a little confusing because it doesn't sound like the right thing. Like it's not like file and new. We're not making a new repository. We just need to connect to one that's online. The verb for that, the verbiage in GitHub is a little weird. The verb for that is to clone. So the phrase clone means make a copy of something that's on GitHub. And that's what we're doing. So we're going to clone this repo. I should point out that when you download GitHub Desktop, you have to sign in, and it's the same sign-in you use for github.com, and that's how it connects. So when I say clone a repository, it knows to go to my folder here. What did we make? Monday. I wish this was in order of when we made it, but it's not. It's alphabetical. Let's see. Where's Monday? There it is. Okay, so I'm going to hit clone. And it looks like nothing happened, right? No local changes. It looks like just everything stopped. But let me point out, it says fetch origin never fetched. Let's go to history, and we can see the stuff that we've done to this, right? Like where we added the text and stuff like that. So that's kind of cool. What if we hit fetch origin? Yeah, it fetched it. It's really quick. Like we keep doing that over and over again. There's not really any point to it. Let's show in Finder, and here are the files that we got. So here's Monday, and here's our content, right? So if we went into this readme.md and edited it, oh gosh, it's trying to launch Xcode. No. We can edit a markdown file in anything. I would probably edit it with Atom. We could edit it, I don't know if brackets still exist in your computer. You can edit it with that. Text edit is totally valid for editing these things. Again, they're markdown files, so they're designed for ultimate compatibility. But you can see it's just literally the markdown that we had written on the web. Let me do some funky things. I want to add some files to this project, and I'm going to add them locally and then push them to github.com. Okay, so let me get this out of the way. So as you can see, my desktop is an absolute mess. So I'll grab some of that stuff. Let's see. Well, here's the Lizzo and Adele stuff we did on Friday. Let's upload all that. Now I'm going to make a copy of this stuff, right? That is, I'm not going to actually take it out of Lizzo and Adele. I'm going to make a copy of it. What we would do if this project already exists is we would create a new Git repo in this folder. The way I'm doing it is I'm working kind of from scratch. Okay, so again, I just took a bunch of files and copied them into my local Monday folder. When I go back over to GitHub Desktop, everything changes. So GitHub, and it does this online too, color codes a lot of stuff. What it's indicating to me is that there have been a lot of additions. Specifically, we've added like 10 files, right? And it's actually showing us the content of these files. We could even go in and edit them if we wanted. Right now, it's just adding them though, right? But yeah, I could go in and edit this if I wanted. I'm not gonna. This does not exist online right now, right? Online doesn't have any of these files. So how do I get the files? Well, I can't just hit fetch. Remember, that gets stuff from the server and brings it down. I need to push this stuff out. In order to push content, you have to make what's called a commit. So I warned you all about these verbs. There's a lot of verbs. Well, there's repository, I guess that's a noun. When we clone something, that means we're grabbing a repo from online. When we push content, that means we're sending it from local to online. And when we pull content, that means or fetch it, that means we're grabbing from online to local. The verb that I was just introducing is commit. So the idea here is I have to commit these files to our repository, and then I can push them. Every time you add a commit, you have to summarize it. So I'm going to say added JSON files, and then commit to main. Okay, so what's happened is I have two versions of this project, right? There's one online and there's one local. I've done all these changes locally, and now I need to push them to our repo online. So let me click this guy. You can see it working. And now my appearance totally changes, right? So the changes thing is gone. I can go to history if I wanted. Note it doesn't show like your files sitting here. This isn't like an application that wants to show you all your files. You can look at them in here, but really they're right here, right? They're in your folder. So if you want to look at it, it's just a click show in Finder. If you want to see your repo, you're supposed to hit view in GitHub, right? So it's got all the buttons you need there. You can see there are all our lyrics. They've been added. So that is nice. Okay. The other there are two other things I want to show you with Git and GitHub. Let's say I made this thing like, let's say I made a package in R that does something cool. Like Tyler made a package in R that scrapes the New York Times API and then paginates it because it only gets 10 results. It waits a minute and then it gets the next 10 results, and it waits a minute, it gets the next 10 results. So that's a really cool package. He made that. Let's say I looked at that and I said, hey, that's really cool, but I noticed it doesn't work with this type of query, or the pagination breaks after 4 or whatever. I see an opportunity to take what you've done and make it better. How would I do that? Well, if I were a programmer, I could download his whole repo, right, which is publicly available, and then I could edit the R code in that if I wanted to make my own package. So people take existing GitHub repos, duplicate them, and then improve on them. Let's say Tyler himself decided, hey, I have an idea of making this project better. He probably wouldn't want to overwrite his existing files in his GitHub repo. The way people add to something that already exists and say already functions and has a purpose is they would add a branch. So here's my main thing that I'm making. Well, I'm just going to make this branch, and it's basically a clone of it. And then I'm going to add all this stuff to it. And if it works, then I'm going to have the branch merge back into the main. So in other words, it's kind of like you're creating this offshoot, like a mutant version of what you've already made. It's an exact copy and allows you to go nuts on it. And if everything goes wrong, you can just throw it out. But if it works, then you can merge it back into your original and you made your product better. So you can imagine if they released, Windows 11 and then they're working on Windows 12. Well, Windows 12 is basically kind of like a clone of Windows 11, but they're improving it, right? They're like, well, let's change all this stuff. And in case something breaks, we won't use it. But if it works, we're going to merge it back in. All right, I'm going to try to create a branch and merge this stuff back in, if I can remember how to do that. So first of all, let me make sure, yeah, we've got all our stuff up here. You can see we have one branch here, right? And it is called main. Up until about a year or 2 years ago, this was called master, and they renamed it to main. So I'm pretty sure I went through and renamed all of mine, so it defaults to naming main instead of master. You might want to make sure you make that change. There was a period where it was constantly conflicting with me because it was looking for master and mine were all called main. That's something that's been resolved here, which is nice. Anyways, here's my branch. I could click new branch and it's going to source it off of main. I'm going to create a branch. Let's call it, let's see, what was the first one called? Monday. Let's call our branch Tuesday. This makes no sense. All right. Okay, so now we have two branches, right? There's main and then there's Tuesday. Well, if I go into Tuesday, like I mentioned, it's identical. There's no difference between this and my other branch. But let's say I want to edit it. I'm going to go into this R file. And this is a preview of it, right? I can hit raw and it'll show it to me in a browser. Let me hit back. Can also hit this pen button and I should be able to edit it directly in here. Now this is R code, but it doesn't know that. It doesn't care. It's just text, right? Let's say I could go down to the bottom and say, yay, isn't this cool? Okay, I'm going to commit those changes. So I've made a very minimal change to my project here, right? And I'm in, let's see, where's branches? I'm not seeing branches anymore. Yeah, I don't see them anymore. Let me go back to here. Okay, Tuesday had recent pushes less than a minute ago. Compare and pull request. So I created this branch, this copy of Monday. And I added one line, right? And it's saying, all right, here is the original. We're able to merge it. It can't do a preview because it's in R. So let me create a pull request. So this is requesting that we merge these two into, well, basically we merge Tuesday into main. So we have one primary branch. Come on. There we go. Checking for ability to merge automatically. Merge, confirm. Yay, all right. That was so much harder 2 years ago. It's still like you hit the button 3 times, like, come on. But that's a lot easier than it used to be. You know, it's still hard deleting repositories. It does not want you to delete a repository. So if I go to Monday, the UX has always been a little confusing on GitHub. These are the settings for this pen, I keep saying that, for this repo. Sorry, I use CodePen a lot. I guess that's what I'm thinking of. Anyways, the settings are insane. There's so many settings for each one of these. All the way at the bottom, they have the danger zone, and that's where you can delete a repo. And even then, when you hit delete, it has you type something in to make sure you're not a robot. Like, they really try to make sure you don't mess it up and accidentally throw it in the trash can. Okay, so the idea is you have a local version of your project. It is synced with your GitHub version. And so now if I was collaborating, say, with Jenny, when she goes to our shared repo, it's going to have all of my latest code, all of her latest code. When she goes to edit it, we're not going to overwrite each other's work at all. So this is really expertly designed for collaborative work, which is why it's quite possible you'll use it wherever y'all end up being employed. Let's see, you'll notice that it says about, no description, website, or topics provided. So you just have to click this and be like, you know, this is a description. That's not a very good description, but you get the idea. If you're trying to get people to find your content, you'd probably want to control this a lot more. And what people used to do is just tweak this a lot, their README, where it would be like really impressive and they just spell out all this stuff. So for instance, Spotify R on GitHub. This is the package we use to access Spotify. It's made by just this dude who goes by Charlie86. And so what he did is for his Spotify R, his README gives you an overview of it. It tells you how to install it, authentication, a screenshot, and then a few examples of what you can do with it. So that's his README. That's cool. That's how we used to do it a few years ago. If we were using GitHub to push out something like this, I made this cool package, everyone should use it. It's on GitHub. This is also on CRAN, which is a repository for R, but a lot of packages get pushed to GitHub before they're updated to CRAN. And any packages that aren't approved by CRAN only live on GitHub. So there is a bevy of useful packages on here. There's, I think, one more thing I want to say. Yeah, well, I forgot that, but that's not a big deal. It's just a weird terminal thing, which is that GitHub will allow you to host a web page for free, only one page. And the idea is that you would host, but by host, I mean, it's going to run as a website. It's going to display as a website. You can use it as a website. The primary use for this is if you have a GitHub repo that's useful to people and you make this whole page that's describing it. So what I'm saying is if Spotify R was just made, instead of just tweaking the README file, what this Charlie86 person would have done instead is make this a website using GitHub pages. So let me show you what that looks like. I did it with my portfolio page. So this is just a CSS and HTML page, and I put it on GitHub. I'm going to show you how I set up this repo. And when you tell it to display this as a website, right, not just show the list of files, but actually display the content, it changes the URL. So it becomes your username.github.com or .io. So it's a subdomain. So they've done this kind of weird, interesting thing. Okay, what does that look like in like actually on GitHub? Well, I'm in the right place. GitHub.com B-Walsh5. Let me go to repos, and here it is. So if you look at this, it's just an index.html and a style.css. But again, it is programmed to show the HTML file. So the way that I did that is you go into settings and then go down to pages. GitHub Pages is designed to host your personal, organization, or project pages from a GitHub repo, and your site is live. So basically, you can use this page to set it up to display live. So I believe the restriction is you can only do this to one page. And that's why I'm showing you my existing page, because I don't want to get rid of it. I'm pretty sure, therefore, that we cannot do this to like the one we just made. So here's Monday. But let's look. I'm going to go to settings, pages. All right, source, deploy from a branch. Yeah, sure. Branch, main. Now we hit save. And it's going to ask us if we want to add a custom domain. Otherwise, it's bwalsh5, blah, 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 blah. Again, I am not going to do this. I hope I didn't just screw it up. Let's see. bwalsh5.github.io. Nope, we're still good. Let me force a refresh and make sure. Yeah, so that's still good. If we look at the code that makes this up, this is just the code that I wrote. So it's not like the code is housed inside like a GitHub page. It really is like publishing, right? In as if it were a web hosting program. So if y'all don't have any web hosting services and you just need to host one page, and it wouldn't make sense on a place like RPubs or Tableau Public, that's what I use this for. And I was alluding to this earlier, but in lieu of having an actual portfolio with content, I just linked to my Tableau Public and all that kind of stuff. Ooh, there's a fresh new look. So anyways, yeah, GitHub page is really cool, kind of new. GitHub is always expanding and adding new stuff, including that weird GitHub Copilot thing or whatever it's called. Let me close all this stuff. So I would encourage y'all to, here's how I use GitHub. If I'm working on something that I would be sad if I lost it, I just make it a GitHub repo, because it's really, really easy to, once you have this set up with GitHub Desktop, just say new repo, blah, and you got a copy of it online. The only way I wouldn't do that is if I was working with really, really large files and I thought I'd max out. I don't even know what the file size max is on GitHub, but most of the stuff that we work with is really small, right? Our files are really small. Python files are really small. HTML and CSS files are really small. Our data can be really big. But usually if it's going to be so large that we couldn't upload it to a website, we'd be using an API anyways. So all this is really like pretty small file size kind of stuff. So you could make everything a GitHub repo. I don't think it's going to cause, any big problems. People teach with GitHub. They'll just do like their whole lesson plans and push it out to GitHub. It's pretty crazy. I'm using GitHub right now, as you saw, for working on that book with Jenny, and that was probably the part of the book that I was most intimidated by, because I've just had this wrestling matches with GitHub before where I've accidentally deleted work or not been able to connect. It's so much easier now with GitHub Desktop. It's just like a breeze. I feel really comfortable with it. Anyways, that's everything I wanted to say about Git and GitHub. So let me go ahead and end this recording. Let's see.